What's up everyone, and welcome to another Rust electrical tutorial. I'm Austin, and today I'm going to be covering how to update the Mini Factory. Since the 2024 Rust electrical update, this thing has required some power remapping, a couple of switch replacements, pretty easy stuff. But all in all, as a build, this is a medium to high level difficulty. So if you're new and you're really struggling with this, that is of course okay. So we're going to get started with the basics here. If you don't already know, the Mini Factory auto crafts and maintains 4 items automatically for you, including turning on and so forth. It has one open crafter for ammo or whatever you want to use it for. I'll cover that over there once we get over there. There's a buffer box beneath the workbench over there, and that maintains backup items for instant replacement, meaning as you take things from the output box, it will take things from the buffer box to sort of essentially buffer you from waiting for something to be replaced via crafting. It takes uses 180 second intervals to craft. That number is customizable, but 180 seconds has proven to be a very good number all around to prevent it from breaking. So that is, of course, your choice to adjust it, but be warned. The updates to the output box occur once every 12 minutes. That's part of the timer loop. We'll cover that over there. The maximum battery active usage is now just 4, and it's actually 3 almost all the time and 4 for a split second. But the takeaway there is that it is very, very low impact on your root power. And it now requires 45 Rust watts to power. So that is considerably better than the first version of this. Okay, so for the build, we're going to do things a little differently. I watched my previous video on this and it was horribly difficult to follow, so I do apologize for that. I'm going to break this thing into 2 halves, the left and right side. The left side is going to be from this splitter left, and the right side is going to be from this stuff here right. So before we get started, there's a couple of things that you should note. One, there are 2 industrial crafters installed. Only the top industrial crafter is actually part of the Mini Factory. The bottom industrial crafter is that extra one that you can craft whatever you want. This is a very simple, this purple line here is a very simple crafting. It's just for, I suggest ammo would be the easiest thing to use it for. But the top crafter, which is part of the actual Mini Factory, is where you're going to put your blueprints. I have an AK, a Python, the grenade, and the syringe. And then note that I pre-crafted one of each item to put in here. You must do that. The system requires one of these to be in here each in order for it to run, and it will replenish itself as it goes. But to start, make sure you do that. Another thing to note is that you do not want to have 2 items that have the same recipe, just different quantities. That has and continues to break this. So I suggest being very careful. Just look at your recipes. If they are the same, but just different amounts, pick one of them. Don't do both. Next thing to note is that the conveyors are paired. So this top conveyor here is paired to this top conveyor here. This conveyor here is paired to this conveyor here, and so forth. So that is an important relationship. The timers also are associated with a pair. So these top conveyors here, they have a timer that's hooked up between them. So if you were to say, hook up a timer accidentally between 2 non-paired conveyors, it would not work. So you're going to want to be careful when you're wiring things up. Lastly, before we get started, this box here is the output box. This is where everything will end up. This is the buffer box. We'll talk about that as it's crafting. And then over here, this is my source box or input box. This is where all the items are that I need to craft the particular things that I have set up to be crafted. Note that it is important that, say, the AK recipe, it must show up all at once. You can't have 3 of the items show up and then the wood slowly build with each time the conveyor passes its maximum amount. So if you have that happen, it's because you don't have enough stacks. And so you'll notice that I have, way too many stacks, all admin level, obviously, so I don't have to keep refilling it. But if your recipe doesn't show up all at the same time, it's because whatever item is lagging is that you don't have enough stacks for that conveyor to access, because they'll access multiple stacks at the same time. Just a little pro tip there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to position myself in a good spot, say right here, and just go ahead and pause the video. Let me back up a little. There we go. Pause the video and set up everything on the left side that we discussed as best you can. I would not suggest trying to hook up the wires. That's going to be very difficult. You can't see them. But the piping, the placement, whatever, you can at least get this thing going to see how it works. So once you have all that set up, we're just going to kind of go through each item at a time. We're going to start with the conveyors. So the left side conveyors here, this is the recipe. This is the item. So we'll start with the top one. If you come over here and look in this one, it's the AK. In fact, what we'll actually go ahead and do is turn this thing on. There we go. It's going to fire up. And there we go. We'll just let it run while we discuss all this stuff, and it'll start filling things, and you can see the output in the end. So the top two conveyors are starting there. It's the AKs. This top one over here is the item itself. So this is, and its pair over here, which like I was talking about, this is the recipe. So you're going to set the recipe up for whatever the item is on the right. In this case, it's the AK, and you're going to set that recipe into the max input. So 250, 1, and 4 respectively. And you're going to set the require all option here down. You don't want any item. You want it to be require all. That is very important. The reason we do that is so that if you're missing one of these items, say you're missing a spring or you don't have a rifle body, you don't want the conveyor to take, you know, everything else and not the rifle body, for instance, because if it does that, it will put part of your recipe into here and then it'll clog and break the system. So on this left side, you're going to make sure that each one of these says require all the way down. On the right side, this is the item itself, and you're going to set whatever you want in the buffer box. So down here, you're going to set in the max value whatever you want in the buffer box right here. Now, this is not just some arbitrary number. It is based on that 180 second timer crafting time per section here. And so for higher level items on a tier 3, right? So assuming you're using a tier 3, the craft time is what dictates this. So for an AK, they take like what, 45 seconds, I think. You don't want to put more than that in here because 180 seconds won't be enough time to make it through, because one very critical thing about this is that it must complete its crafting within the 180 seconds, or it'll bleed over into the next crafting loop and potentially break it because it'll start backing itself up. So that 180 seconds gives plenty of padding for 2 AKs per loop. In this case, 2 pythons per loop. The next one down is the grenade. You can do 5 of those, probably even more, but you know, that's based on that relationship. Down here we have the syringes. I did 4 because they have stacks of 2, and so that all relates to this buffer box. The actual settings in there, you can set it to any item. You do not have to set the right side to require all. So the right side is any item, left side is require all. Left side is, this is the python, this is the grenade, and this is the syringe. And so that's it for setting them up. As far as piping goes, it's very simple from our source box. We're just coming into a couple of splitters here, and these are connected right here. And all the yellow ones are part of the mini factory. We're just splitting up so that all of these conveyors have access to this source box. That's all we're doing here. So we're just kind of splitting it up into 4, and then we're bringing it back into 1 right here. And that's going into the industrial crafter right here, which we have already talked about. That's why we're accessing it. The output is the opposite of that. It's very simple. If you follow the green pipes, we're once again going into some splitters. These are connected right here. And this is just splitting up the output so that each one of these 4 conveyors can see that industrial crafter. And then we're just bringing them all back together again to a single output right here, which is running to the buffer box specifically, not the output box. We're running to the buffer box here, and then its output runs to this conveyor, which we'll talk about next. And then its output runs to the actual output box, which is where once it does a full cycle of 12 minutes, it'll start filling this thing up with whatever I've set. So that leads well into this next conveyor. This conveyor is how much you want in your output box. So this can be any number. It'll just take longer for it to finish it, but it can be any number. I set it to 6 AKs, 6 Python, 30 grenades, and 12 syringes. This is just based on their stack sizes, so it just fit nicely in the box just for this demonstration. But you put whatever you want that to be in the max input there, and that'll be how much this system is essentially working to give you. You're telling it, I want 6 AKs on hand all the time. I want 6 Pythons on hand all the time. The filter mode for this is any item, so you do not have to do require all on this one. As far as wiring up the conveyors, we're going to start down here. This input here, the power in, this is actually running from a power source over there, which we'll cover when we're over there. But once you get past this power in here, its pass-through is simply running to the next one up. We're just daisy chaining here. Its pass-throughs goes to this one. Its pass-through goes to this one, all the way to the top. This pass-through on the top one is just running back down here around to this conveyor's power in here. Its pass-through is going to run to this conveyor down here, and then this one runs to this one, up, 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 And then this last pass through here is running to this splitter, of which and it doesn't matter, the order that you hook these up is irrelevant. The number 1, the orange line, is actually running to this toggle on of this timer over here, which we'll cover when we do the right side. These 2 outputs here, the white lines, each one of those runs to one of these industrial crafters, and it goes to the power in specifically. So then this next white one here runs to the power in specifically. I think I'm on, yeah, it's this one down here, right there. Power in there, power in there. And that's that splitter. That's all you have to do for that. We will, of course, really quickly cover this bottom purple line. This is that bonus one I was talking about. I don't even have anything set up in here. This could be, you'd put a recipe here, and you would set this recipe to, just like you set these, you'd want to make sure that it said require all, because you don't want to ever put in a recipe that's not fully available to you. So require all in the filter mode, and whatever you want to build here. So if you want 556, put the recipe for 556 in here, just like I did up there. And then put your blueprint in here. You don't have to do the output stuff because this is not part of the mini factory. So this is just kind of the most basic auto crafting you could do. You could just say, make me, over here, you would put the 556 in here. I could look up 5.56, and let's say I want, what are they? Let's say I want 128 in the max. So what that's going to do is it's going to put a maximum of 128 into this box here because it's connected. If you follow the piping, comes out of our splitter for our source box, in, out, through the conveyor, or the industrial crafter itself, into this one here, the output, and then its output goes straight to this box. Very, very simple. That can be anything. It can be clothing. You could set this up with something else. You could attach a blueprint swapper to this and have buttons to craft particular types of ammo or whatever. This is a completely bonus crafter that can be for whatever you want. I just set up a basic thing just so you could see how it might operate. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to cover is these timers. We're not going to cover where the power comes from yet because that comes from over there, so we'll cover that. But hooking them up is what we're going to do. And actually, you know what? Before we do that, for something I forgot to mention is that the filter pass, we got to cover the outputs here and inputs. On the conveyors, on the left side, the filter pass of each conveyor is running to its own turn off. So that's very important. We don't use the filter fail. We use the filter pass. It goes to its own turn off. And that's the same thing all the way down, because once it passes the stuff into it, you want that thing to turn off so it doesn't keep trying to pass stuff into the crafter. On this side over here, we also do not use the filter fail. The filter pass here is running to these timers, which is where we're going to cover here next. So as I said before, the timer is associated between a pair. So we're going to do the AK, which is our top conveyors here. And so if you take the filter pass out of the right side, that's going to run to one of the timers. And so it runs to the toggle on of that timer, of which each of these timers is set to 7 seconds. That's a sort of arbitrary number. You want something over 5, but less than 10. So 7's a good number. This is just to prevent the tick rate from, having these, you could in theory run the filter pass directly over to the other conveyor, but the problem is sometimes it misses because of when the game updates. And so this creates a safety buffer that makes sure that it doesn't double hit or double pull in stuff. So all you really got to know is you do need this, and I would set it to 7 seconds. So this top one here, its filter pass is running to the toggle on of this timer. It's set to 7 seconds. The output of that timer is running to the turn on of that paired conveyor. So the line goes filter pass to toggle on, its output to turn on. And that's why what I said earlier is that these timers are associated with a pair. So you got to make sure that whatever this input is coming from the correct one, and the output is also going to the correct one. And that's just duplicated each time. If we go to the next one down here, filter pass, this is running to this timer's toggle on here, also set to 7 seconds. Its output is running to the one down here to its turn on. And you just duplicate that 4 times down the row there, down the column. And lastly, down here, the filter pass on this one is not used, but the filter fail, so when it can no longer transfer something, is running to its turn off over here. So it goes straight across. It goes from here to there. Okay, so that is everything that you need to know about the left side. We'll do a quick check-in here, see how the buffer box is doing. Looks like it's made a full cycle, so it's filled in some in here, and now the buffer box is being filled again, and then it'll source over here from there like we discussed every 12 minutes. So the next thing we're going to work on is the right side, which may seem a little complicated. It is a little bit complicated, but we'll get through it. And so go ahead and pause the video here and set up everything that you see as best you can. Once you've done that, we're going to start with each section. The section over here is just power distribution. That's all it is. It's just sending power to everything that needs power. And this section here, which is what we're going to do now, is going to be from this stuff here to right here. So what we're going to cover now. And this is the timer loop setup. And over here, this is the auto start. And so that's how the system will kick itself on if your server restarts, or if you turn off the switch and turn it back on. It will automatically run from wherever it left off last time. Well, it'll restart, but it won't hurt it to have something partially crafted or whatever. So each one of these stacks from this branch through this XOR switch, XOR switch, whatever you like to call it, into this timer, into this branch up here, and this blocker, this is one unit of the timer loop. And so we're just going to cover the outputs. You'll note that these are all power, which are kind of hard to look at here. But these are all power, and these are sort of split up. So we're going to start from the top here. Each of these timers is associated with one of these paired conveyors. And so since the way a timer loop works, it's easier to wire up if you do it right to left. You don't really need to understand that, but you'll notice these, interval, this one 180, this one 180, this one 180, this one 180, but these go down. So this first one here is this timer loop here. This next timer loop is this one. The third timer loop to the left here is this one. And the fourth one here with the extra stuff on top is this one down here. The extra bonus stuff has no timer. It's not associated with anything. So to build each one of these, the first three, this one, and this loop, they are all the same. So the output of the timer at the top, you set this to 180. I can't look at that one, but they're all set to 180. Runs to this branch here, of which it is set to 1. These three here are all set to 1. The branch out is this green line. That is running to the input on this block pass-through right here. And the power out, the other green line, that is running down here, down to the bottom, into the input of this branch, which is also set to 1. So all the branches for the three on the right are all set to 1. Very simple. The power out of that branch at the bottom is running to either side of this XOR switch. It doesn't matter. I just did this because it was easier to show you. And then the branch out of this is going to go over to its paired set of conveyors. So as I said before, this this right stack here is associated with the top conveyors. So its branch out here is running to the turn on of that top conveyor. So this is where things get complicated. You have to make sure that you keep track of this and do these things sequentially one at a time so you don't get them mixed up. And then from the output of this XOR switch, that's going to run to the same conveyor, except that it's going to run to the turn off. This is how the system, when you're not on the particular timer loop, right now you'll notice this, these have this turn off coming out when they're not active. So when this is not its turn, it has one rust walk coming out. This one doesn't because it's active. This one does. This one does. It just keeps them off so that only one can possibly be on at any given time. So that's it for this bottom part here. And that is actually it for this top part up here. The power out of the blocker that's associated with this runs to the toggle on. I don't know why it does that. It runs the toggle on of the timer to its left. except for over there because it has to loop all the way back to the side over here. But this is power out here is just going to run to the toggle on of the timer to its left. And you're just going to duplicate that 3 times. So same thing, I've color coded these purple. So this timer here set to 180 goes to this branch, is set to 1. The blocker, the branch out here runs to the block pass through. The power out runs down to the bottom here to the input of this branch down here, of which it is set to 1. And so you have 1 is coming out here. The power out runs to the XOR switch here. So these are both 1. So actually it doesn't even matter if you mix these up and send one to the wrong. It doesn't matter. As long as you use the right XOR switch and the right conveyor, it'll work. So this is running to either one of these. And then the, in this case, branch out is running to the next conveyor down. Because remember I said this stack is associated with these conveyors, the second one down. That's running to the turn on that conveyor right there. And just like the other one, the power out of that same XOR, or XOR switch, if you will, for those of you who prefer that, is running to the turn off of that same conveyor. So this stack here is the top conveyors. This stack here is the second conveyors down. This third one is the exact same as the other 2 that I just did. Power out to that branch. Its power out runs down here. This one runs to the XOR switch. Its output is running to the turn off over here. The turn on of this one is coming from this here, just like the other ones were. And at the top, same thing. The branch out is running over to the block pass through of that blocker. This is set to 1. This is set to 1. These 3 stacks are identical. The output of this blocker runs to the toggle on of the timer to its left. The output of this one's running into the toggle on of the timer to its left. And that's it. It's when you get to this 4th one here, and this is associated with the bottom one here. This one is tied into the auto start system, and it's tied in to the update. It's when this one runs that this box receives whatever's available in the buffer box is sent to this box, and that's associated with this. So starting here at this power out from this timer, still set to 180, just like anyone else of the other ones, that runs to this branch. And we'll start from the power out this time. This branch is set to 2, whereas these were all set to 1. Everything here was set to 1. This one is set to 2 because we need 2 coming out of here and 1 coming out of here. This one runs around just like the other ones did. This is no different than the other 3 to the right. That runs to this power in down here, of which the power out runs to this XOR switch. Either side, doesn't matter. The branch out, which again set to 1 down here, that's the same. This one is set to 1. That output there runs to over here, just like before, to the turn off, or I'm sorry, turn on, excuse me, right there, turn on. And then its XOR switch at the top here, again, runs over, and that runs into the turn on. So all that's the same. This bottom part is identical to the 3 to the right. It's when we get up here that things change a little bit. So this branch out is going to run into this power in of this branch to its left, and then its power out, this blue line, if you follow this blue line, that is running over to here, the turn on of this one. And so you'll notice it actually just turned on because we just fortuitously hit that loop. So this is essentially saying, okay, my buffer box has got stuff in it, but I don't have all the things that I want to have yet in this box. So it just sent everything it had over here, and it'll keep doing that until this is full, and then it'll fill itself up. And then this is how you can not have to wait for crafting, which we'll cover when it's completely done crafting everything. So that, again, that power out of that branch is going to run to that conveyor's turn on over there on the floor. This branch here is set to 1, so it's just a splitter. We want 1 out of here, 1 out of here. The output of this branch out is going to run to either side of this OR switch here. I have it on the B side, but it doesn't matter which side it comes out to. And that is, you know, from here to here, that completes the hookup over there. This blocker here is the same in terms of, I just colored it white because it was, you know, I wanted to separate it from these, is running to, you know, the timer to its left, but that timer is over here. So that's what makes it a loop. It's running the toggle on of the timer on the far right. So that blocker there, its output is running to the toggle on here. That's how the system loops back around to the next cycle of 12 minutes. Over here of this OR switch that this branch should run to, its output here, the power out, is running to the block pass-through on that blocker right there. And then below it here, we have another timer. This one is set to 1 second, as is this one. These are the only two timers that are set to 1 second. This one here and this one here. They're just used as a switch, basically. Its output is running to whatever input you didn't use on this OR switch when you hooked up this stuff. So that actually gets through all the main components of the timer loops. And then over here, we have this auto start system, which again, I'm not going to cover we'll cover the power mapping for all this here in a second. But if we start over here at this branch here, this branch is set to 3. So we want 3 coming out of here because we want 1, 1, and 1. So this power here is coming out of here, but we'll start right here. So 3, this branch out goes to the power end of the splitter. Make sure this is set to 3. The power out, which should have 1, is running over to this over here. That's to this toggle on of this timer over here, which was part of the stuff we already discussed. So its toggle on comes from this right here, which is 1. So essentially I just made a 4 output splitter that each has 1 coming out of each one. The output of these, we can just follow these now. The power out of this one is running all the way over to here. It doesn't matter which one of these AND switches you use. We'll just stop the explanation there because we haven't gotten here yet. But you're running to that AND switch over here from this power out. This is just a simple way for me to get a rust watt over there. So I just arbitrarily came from here. Same thing here. These are the auto starts for the crafters. So each one of these two blue lines, doesn't matter which one goes where, they run over to the turn on these 2 auto crafters. So when the system receives power, it powers these, but it also turns them on. So that's how we do that, is it comes from these 2 right here. So from up here, I guess we can, this look like it's power from over there. Yep. This output of this timer up here, which is the other timer that's set to 1 second. Remember, 1 and 1. That's just looping down here to whatever side, in this case, it's the B side of this XOR switch here, of which its input here is coming from over there, which we'll cover here in a moment. The output of that XOR switch is what's running to this branch here. So if you have to rewind and go back and kind of follow that, this section is the auto start, but it's also just sort of some arbitrary power reference signals I have sending that it was just easy to do from here. So I could have just as easily put those somewhere else, but I chose to do it as part of the auto system so that these things turn on. So that is everything you need to know about the timer loop. We've covered every major input here except for the power mapping, which is what we're going to do next. Okay, so the last thing we're going to cover before we check on the build itself is the power mapping. This is the right side here, and this is from this branch and this branch to the right. And that is simply just all the power distribution throughout multiple switches, multiple areas, which we'll just trace each one out so you can see where it goes. This branch down here, which is connected to this switch, who is in turn connected over here, which I think I just turned it black on accident. Let me fix that. There we go. All right there. This is running from actual power, which we'll of course cover very, very, very last. But this is the primary branch as far as the input of the system goes. And you'll notice that these 3 branches to the right, these are all daisy chained off each other. So the power out of this first one is the power in of this one. Its power out to the power out of this one, or power in of this one, excuse me. Its power out to the power in of this one. So we'll cover these 4 first. These are pretty simple. This one's set to 1. And its branch out is running over to this timer right here. So that branch out is that yellow line. It runs to this timer, which is one of the 1 second timers that we just covered. So right there. The next branch is set to 4. And its power out here is running over to this XOR switch, XOR switch right there. So whatever one you didn't use from here, you're going to run that to here, or B, doesn't matter. And you have to have 4 arriving there so that you pass the 4. Here's this branch, 3 and 4. So that's that one there. Next one over is this white line. This is set to 13 this time. And this white line, if you follow it, is running over to this branch. So this branch is feeding over to this branch, which is just a 4 output splitter. That's why you'll see me do this a lot, is that when I need 4 outputs, but I only have 3 available, or I need some 4th one and an easy one, I'll do this. So running from here to here, 13 to this branch here. This branch is set to 12 because I want 4, 4, and 4. I have 13 arriving, which gives me 1 left over here. So we'll cover this one first. This white line, if you follow it, this is the power out. It should have 1 if you set these up correctly. And if you follow this over, it runs all the way over to here. And so I just needed 1 rust watt here, and that's how I got it, is right there at this timer. This is the other 1 second timer that we covered before. So white line there comes from here, this right there. From the splitter, each one of these, there's 4 of these, or 3 of these, I'm sorry, with 4 rust watts each. So this first one, which is, if you can see that, that's this one here, the red one. If you follow that red one up and over, it is running to this little group here. So I should have 4 arriving because I want to set this to 3. So I have 1 coming out of here, 1 coming out of here, 1 coming out of here, and 1 coming out of here. And so if you follow all of these, we'll start with this first one. This power out, if you follow the red one, is going to one of the power ins of these timers over here that we covered earlier. And so the other 3 are coming from the same ones. So if I trace this one here, back along the red lines, that's coming from here. This next one here is running to one of the other ones. And then finally this one here on the right is running to here. Basically, these 4 outputs, 1, 2, 3, and 4, all with 1 rust watt, are running to power those 4 timers that are on the wall above the workbench. So going down here to the next one, here we have this blue one. If you follow the blue one up, the blue one runs to this setup here. Here we go. Once again, you'll notice it's the same amount, 4. This is set to 3, so that I have 1, 1, 1, and 1. And these, if you follow the outputs of these 4 1 rust watt outputs, these are running to each of these blockers here. They're just kind of hard to see, but they run to right there. So if I trace this power here, you'll see that line right there. That runs to there. This one runs to the next one right here. And then finally, this power in of this blocker is running from here. So these blue ones are powering the blockers right here in the timer loop chains. The last one down here, the yellow one, if you follow the yellow one up, that runs to this little setup right here. Once again, same, set to 3, just like the other ones, because I want 1, 1, 1, and 1. And if you follow these, the yellow ones, these are powering these XOR switches over here, and you set them to whatever one you didn't connect this to, you're going to set that to. And so if same thing, if I just follow this over, you can see that's coming from there. If I follow that next one over, it's going here, and follow the last one over, it's going here. So the point is, the yellow lines are powering the XOR switches in the timer loops there. And then the last one here, if you look at, we covered that right here on this one here. I guess, well, there's one more after this. This here is running to this AND switch, which recall earlier, we traced one side of this AND switch, if you follow this purple line, coming from this splitter here. We covered that earlier. The other side of that AND switch is coming from right here, of which this is set to 13. So you have 13 coming out, arriving, and this is going through a switch, which I'll cover in the end, just when I kind of sort of talk about tips and tricks or whatever and why this is here. This is optional. Super suggest that you do this though, and I'll show you why. So you have 13 arriving here. This output's just connected to the switch. Its output of that switch, importantly, is running up to this setup with the orange ones and the white one. So you have 13 arriving. You're going to set this to 9 because I want 3, 3, 3, and 4. So that's why I color coded this one white, because it is different, whereas these are all the same. They're all the same outputs. This one has one anomalous output that is 1 rust watt more than these. So 3, 3, 3, and 4. If you follow the white one, that runs to this timer loop specifically. And so because this has the extra stuff and we have to do more with it, this one's the one that's set to 2, that output requires 1 available per side of this. So we need 1 extra rust watt, arriving at this timer. And so that's what that is. These other ones here, the orange lines, those all run to these timers to power this one, and this one. So if you trace these ones back, they run to here, this one to here. So because these only need 3 coming out because they don't have the extra stuff. So in this particular one, you got to be careful that you send the one that has 4 rust watts over to the far left timer loop to help power this extra stuff that we talked about earlier. And then finally, down here, this green line is actually the line, so you should have 14 coming out of there. If you've set all this up, if you set these branches to 1, 4, 13, and 13, you will automatically have the right amount if you set the initial branch to 45, which we'll cover in a minute. You should have, from this output, you should have 14. This is the line that travels behind everything to this first conveyor. At the very beginning, we talked about that. That's where that comes from. So you should have 14 arriving there, because when that power daisy chains through them, comes down, powers this one, comes around, powers this one, powers these, you need to make sure that you have 3 coming out of the top to this splitter, which we covered, so that you have 1, 1, and 1. That's where that original thing came from, was right here. So as far as power mapping goes down here, that is complete. That we have covered every single thing. Everything's been powered. Everything's been mapped. It is, again, medium to high difficulty. So if you're confused or think this is insane, it kind of is. So don't feel bad. So the last thing to look at here is that over here from the battery, I've got my output of my battery coming over to this branch. The system requires 45. So here we go right there. These are, you wouldn't use these. These are just there so you can see how much power is coming out. 45 out of this branch. That runs out of that branch all the way over to this master switch for the system, and then its output is to that primary branch that I talked about when we first covered that. And so that is actually, if you made it this far and everything's working, that is the complete build and update for the Mini Factory. So the next thing I'm going to do is just kind of, now that we've covered the build, if that's what you came here for, good luck. If you have any questions, of course, I can answer them on my Discord, which I'll cover here in the end. But some things to note now that it's running, we've completed this, is that this here is the master switch. And so this is how you can either just turn it on and off if you want to, but for me, it really is just to simulate that it does auto start. That was kind of the point of having that. But you could actually use that if you want a actual master switch to turn the entire thing off. Things to note, if it's set up correctly, only one timer loop will be active at a time. So if you look on here, you'll see this branch is active, but none of the other ones are. It should be doing that. Of this side here, only one of these should be on at a time. If you set up all this correctly, you should never have more than one of these on at a time. If you see a second one on, or one that doesn't turn off, you missed something, or you more likely didn't send the right amount of power somewhere. So go through and check to make sure that that's correct. These will turn on for a second, just enough to pass a recipe, and then they turn themselves off. So if these stay on, check to see that your filter pass is connected to your turn off back there. That would be a reason why you might see that. You'll notice over here that when it's running, when it's in sort of limbo waiting, it's 3 active usage, which is great. So you're charging, your battery drain on this is almost nothing. It uses 45 rust watts, but it doesn't drain. The capacity loss is so slow that this is actually, it might seem like sort of conflicting ideas, but it just means that your root power to keep this from draining your battery is extremely, extremely, extremely small. So now we'll just take a look to see how far we've gotten here in the time that I've been doing the tutorial. Looks like we got all the AKs done. We got all the Pythons done. And it looks like it's working on the grenades. And we got so it actually did everything except for it has 3 more loops for the grenades. And so that's actually a good example, is that right now in here, there it is. It probably just took the grenades. Oh no, we're still working on that. So it's working to fill the grenade. So you can see, depending on what you're crafting, it will take more or less time depending on how much time has gone by. And so what would happen now, let's pretend that we have everything. If I were to say take a AK, what it's going to do is the next time it loops around to the AK, it's going to go, okay, well, this one here is going to say, well, I want 6 AKs but I only have 5 because a player took an AK. So it's going to replace that AK immediately with an AK from this buffer box, so that you don't have to wait for it to actually craft one. So the buffer, you can think of whatever you have here, you actually have this plus 2 in the buffer box that, you know, once every 12 minutes it'll update and then it'll fill itself back up. So depending on how much you take, 12 minutes might kind of seem like a lot of time, but it's really not in the context of the game. When you're out grinding, you can pretty much take anything from this, leave, and by the time you get back, probably it's gonna have been replaced. So that, folks, is just about all I've got. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. Otherwise, you can get me on my Discord. See you later.